Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, my dear brothers and sisters and viewers of Iqra TV. Welcome to a special edition of Real Talk. I'm your host Iqbal Bana. Today we want to talk mainly about the election that is being held in Batley-on-Spen, a unique event that is taking place following the appointment of the previous MP, Tracy Brabin, as the first mayor of West Yorkshire. This is something that is unique in the sense that this election was supposed to be mainly a two-horse race, but has been sort of made more interesting by the arrival of George Galloway as the third possible candidate in this election debate and discussion that we're going to be talking about today. But today obviously is a breaking news day, and I'm sure many of you will have heard the latest breaking news, which is the resignation of Matt Hancock. So I want to talk about that issue as well. And to help me with this discussion debate is somebody very familiar to every one of you, a man that I've previously described as my mentor, who has taught me everything that I know, and there's much more to learn from him. The man who is the face of Muslims in the media. The media do not provide much attention to the Muslim community, the mainstream media, but this gentleman is on every national and international media outlets. Whenever there's an issue, he is there championing the voice of the Muslim community. And if it wasn't for him, we probably would not have anybody representing the true voice of Islam and the Muslims in this country. And therefore, I salute him and respect him. And he's a man who does not mince his words. He tells people what is the reality and what are true facts. Does not do so trying to appease people in the media to try and make them feel happy and good, but tells it as it is. So, my dear friends, I would like you to really welcome my deeply respectful guest that I have today. As I say, whenever I'm in his presence, I'm always in awe of him. Because as I say, he's the one who mentored me into this line of work. So on behalf of you and all the viewers of Iqra TV and Iqra TV itself, I'd like to say a huge welcome to Brother Muhammad Shafiq of the Ramadan Foundation. Muhammad Shafiq, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My dear friend, it's really nice to have you here.
Back. What a night to be back.
I know.
So much going on politically,
exactly,
and the by-election and certainly
great to be on. The resignation of Matt Hancock
as well. Who's just resigned in the last hour, which we expected was going to happen. But there's a bigger story to that. The Sunday Times has a story tomorrow in the paper,
right,
which is around that he's been using private email, Gmail, for government business. And
so there's more to it than that.
There's probably more to it, I think.
I mean, generally, obviously, Matt Hancock, whatever you may think of him, he has been in charge of the health service for quite a while now and has been at the forefront of the fight against COVID. So whether you liked what he did or didn't do, or should have done something more or less, obviously he has been there. He has been at the forefront of the fight. And there's been a lot of criticism about his handling of the COVID and the pandemic and the way it's been sort of panned out. There's also this issue about the Nightingale hospitals that were built in our area. The £32 million was spent on building the Nightingale hospital in Harrogate, which never treated a single patient. And there's concerns about why was that money wasted? Was it just an insurance policy, or could something better would have been done with that money? But I mean, generally, did you think he had no alternative but to go?
Yeah, so I think he was somebody who created these rules. He got up in the House of Commons, he advocated for these rules,
yes, and
said that we cannot mix with people from outside our bubble, family members, the people that we live with, and then you get a situation where he breaks those rules. Now, obviously, the circumstances around the affair is a matter for him and his family. We wouldn't want to get into that. That's obviously a personal matter. But the fact that he had, I actually remember Professor Neil Ferguson last year, the eminent professor, who was caught in a similar situation, breaking the rules. Matt Hancock said he had to resign. He had no alternative.
Exactly.
And so I'm surprised that he lasted 24 hours. I think what would have happened is the Prime Minister would have said to him, look, sleep on it. Let me know what you think tomorrow.
Well, the Prime Minister originally said, the matter is closed. He is happy and he's content that Mr. Hancock had given an apology to the nation and to the Prime Minister. And as far as the Prime Minister was concerned, that the matter was completely closed. It was over and done with. So obviously something's happened between that decision and the resignation this afternoon.
Yeah, so obviously, for those people like us who political animals and in the media. We know that the Sunday papers would have carried on this story, the Mail on Sunday, the Sunday Times, possibly the Observer. And so they would have been digging away at some of the issues. I told you about the Times story, which is he was using personal emails, which his officials and the civil service wouldn't have had access to. But I understand that he drove to Chequers today to see the Prime Minister and offered his resignation. And, you know, it calls into question why it took 48 hours. When you know that you've broke the rules, that you lasted 48 hours. And I think the other thing which we're going to take into consideration here is the Batley and Spen by-election. The last 24, 48 hours since the debate on British Muslim TV, we've seen a shift, I think, towards Labour and Kim Ledbetter. And the Tories were seeing this as well. The returns from yesterday's canvassing was a lot more difficult. Hancock being raised on the doorstep, and the Tories were worried, and that would have played a part, I think, going forward. Because had this story gone on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, as people went to vote on the Thursday, it would have been in the back of their mind.
Well, the chances are that more digging could have been done by the press and the media, and they may have found out other stuff that may not have been conducive to the image of the former Secretary of State for Health and the Conservative Party, and therefore one of the speculations is that he'd been given no choice but to resign, and that's what some of the media are saying. But obviously we're waiting to see who the replacement is. At the moment, Mohammed Shafiq, and I probably feel that it's Nadeem Zahawi, who maybe put in his place.
Yeah, a couple of journalists have reported that, including myself, I've reported that it's going to be Nadeem Zahawi, but Downing Street just pushed back in the last hour or so and said, we're not in a position to announce that. So maybe that was Nadeem Zahawi's supporters putting the name out there, you know, pushing Downing Street into making the announcement. And there's, in the last few moments, there is reports that Michael Gove might also be
That's the other name. That is
safe pair of hands. He's done really well in the Cabinet Office. He's handled the Brexit negotiation. Okay, he's a neoconservative, pretty anti-Muslim, I would argue, and responsible for the Islamophobia we've seen these past few years. But in terms of being a competent minister, he's a safe pair of hands, and he might go for that.
One of the speculations is that obviously he is a man who's reformist, and he reformed previous departments or tried to, within education in particular. That he might be a safe pair of hands, wanting to reform the Department of Health and the NHS. So it'd be interesting to see if he does get the job, what the impact was going to be on the NHS service itself. But coming back, as you said, some of the findings or the soundings in particular may have been influenced by what is happening in Batley and Spen. Now, obviously, you're a political analyst. You must be watching this, and I know you were in Batley on Monday.
I was,
and you've been there a few times.
So yesterday.
You were there yesterday as well. All right. You've been there a few times just to measure the temperature of what is going on. But can I first of all say, yesterday in the masjid we had the Imam Sahib, who made quite a change of announcements yesterday, because particularly in the Gujarati mosque community, we never talk about politics at all. Politics is something that is completely left outside the door. But yesterday he made an exception, and the reason why he made the exception was that one of the strong points of being a Muslim and following the rules of Islam and the ways of the Prophet ﷺ is to have good akhlaq, that your behavior must influence not just yourselves but others as well. And the Imam Sahib talked about some of the behavior in our community around this campaigning that is going on, and how some people have used this opportunity to make comments and remarks about individuals which are totally unacceptable, and some of the behavior that has been displayed by many people from different parties, political parties or no political parties, but who are engaged and involved in this campaigning, that he said that we needed to rein back. We need to look back at our behavior, the way we are confronting some of our opponents. And he said that, be one of those who may have difference with people, but once you've debated your difference, still remain as friends. And that is what Islam teaches us. And some of the antics that we've seen outside, in the campaigning itself, has left some really not very good taste in people's minds and eyes. And I know we witnessed, I didn't witness it, but I saw the behavior of one particular individual with Kim Leadbeater outside the mosque on Friday, which has had a major impact on some of the influences of people in the way they think this election is going to go. We might come back to that. But I mean, coming from outside,
yeah, so Gina,
you're a political analyst, very much interested in watching what is going on, and has a huge influence on people's sort of thinking around elections. How have you seen this election taking place? It was supposed to be a two-horse race, and then we had George Galloway come in. By the way, we did invite some of the main candidates to come here today. Initially, we thought that some of them were hoping to make it here, but unfortunately they can't. So we've decided not to invite any of the candidates and rather have the better substitute and have a discussion with Mohammed Shafiq. You're looking from outside, obviously, being a political analyst,
yeah,
very much interested in politics and how these events take place. What are your initial thoughts about what is happening in Batley and Spen?
Yeah, so there's significant, if you look at the red wall, seats that had been Labour for decades. This isn't Keir Starmer's fault. It's happened over, I would argue, over 20, 30 years. Successive Labour leaders, including the 30 years of the Labour government, took these places for granted because they were rock-solid Labour seats.
Yes.
I know Batley Spen's slightly different because in 97, before 97, it was a Tory MP.
It's the first time in its long history it went Tory.
Yeah.
Right. We had Sir Alf Broughton before that, and then we had Ken Woolmer, who was the MP, and that was the first possibly major election, that I was engaged with, and unfortunately we lost it at that time. And there was a shift taking place in the country anyway. Yeah,
and similar, since Brexit, there's been a shift.
Yep.
There's been a shift amongst Brexit left-wing voters who feel the Labour Party don't represent their interests. And you saw that in Hartlepool, people who voted Labour for all their lives thinking Labour doesn't stand for me. Labour is not talking about the issues that matters to them.
Yes.
And then it's very much similar in Batley and Spen. But the difference is it's not just the white English working class voters who are asking that question. It's also the Muslim voters.
Yeah, the
Muslim voters who are now saying on Kashmir, on Palestine, international issues, tackling Islamophobia. These issues, Muslims are discovering a voice and realising the impact we can have in these constituencies by holding our leaders to account. And I think that's playing a role as well in terms of the debate. And as you said, you've got the Conservatives who ran I think a pretty lacklustre campaign. It's a very underground campaign. They thought it was in the bag. They did as little as possible. Disgraceful that they've not done any media from the BME community. They've not been out to some of these places. And just before I came on the show, I had a look at Ryan Stevenson, who is the Conservative candidate in Batley and Spen in this by-election. Not a single picture or photograph that he's tweeted of anybody from a BME background.
Well, he was invited, like others.
Yeah.
And he was invited at the debate that we had at British Muslim TV. And as far as I'm concerned, he has not turned up in any local events in the Batley, particularly in the Muslim community area that I'm aware of. But let me also make it absolutely clear, and I'm sure many viewers would have known this. I've said very clearly and publicly that for the last 45 years or 40 years, certainly, I've worked tirelessly for the Labour Party at every local and national elections. And the last one I did, obviously, was Stacey Babin, but more than that with Jo Cox. Jo was a very dear friend of mine, and her loss was an enormous loss to the people of Batley and the Muslim community as well, because she was a true friend of the Muslim community. But the way the Labour Party is going at the moment, I have made it absolutely perfectly clear that I cannot, in all consciousness, support Keir Starmer as the leader of the Labour Party, and therefore I have removed myself from supporting the Labour Party in this particular election, and that I will reflect on where I am after the outcome of this election on a leadership level. However, let's come back to the election itself. Now, people have said to me today, and others as well. And by the way, it's not just a race between the Labour Party, the Conservatives, Liberal Democrats. There are 16 other candidates, and the list is appearing on the screen now. And if you want more information about what they stand for, I'm sure if you go online, you'll be able to find out who they are and what they stand for themselves. But Keir Starmer has been the focus of the attention of the Muslim community since the attack on Gaza and people in Palestine, in a few weeks ago.
Well, I would argue he has been the centre of attention going back to last year, when the Kashmir issue, when India, Prime Minister Modi, withdraw the statehood for Jammu Kashmir, and Keir Starmer came in to office, and in his very first meeting with the Labour Friends of India said it's a bilateral issue between India and Pakistan. It's an internal matter between two countries. And the Labour Party policy has always been to support international UN Security Council resolutions, which are that it's not a bilateral issue. It's an issue between three parties, India, Pakistan, and the Kashmiri people. And you have to support determination of self-determination for the Kashmiri people.
Exactly.
So it started there, obviously amplified to the Islamophobia report that was released by the Labour Party Muslim Network last year. And there's just been a drip that Muslims have been taken for granted by the Labour Party.
Well, that is certainly the case, and this is a pushback by the Muslim community now, isn't there, to say you're not going to accept, you're not going to have our vote automatically. We want something for you to do what we expect, to be the way you want to behave. We want to see a party that is, truly believes in equality, truly respects and values everybody. And one of the other reasons why I personally have stepped back from the Labour Party is I was very actively involved in the anti-apartheid movement. And the Labour Party was at the forefront of the anti-apartheid movement. And now I see a Labour Party which does not support the anti-apartheid issues in Israel and Palestine that are taking place. And I felt, this is not the party that I support, and I want to be part of it.
The irony, I was talking to a senior advisor to Keir Starmer only a few days ago. And I said the irony about Keir Starmer is that he's an international human rights lawyer. He's a barrister by profession. He was director of public prosecutions, but also he was somebody who had a distinguished record when it came to international human rights. And suddenly now, as leader of the Labour Party, because he's had to inherit the mess of anti-Semitism and the aftermath of dealing with that, the Equality Human Rights Commission report, that there's a perception, he obviously would disagree with his perception, that he's having to deal with the anti-Semitism, and that's putting off people, in those communities. And I just think if you look in those communities, if you look at Batley and Spen, you look at the diverse communities, Muslims are not seen no longer as a block vote.
Yes, exactly.
People, whatever the Labour Party does, will vote for the Labour Party. The Labour Party today, in the 21st century, in 2021, has to earn the respect of voters. And every single voter, they have to earn that respect. Now, I want somebody in Parliament representing me who represents my values, who represents my thoughts. I'm fortunate we've got Tony Lloyd,
very good candidate,
very good MP, distinguished member of Parliament, and he's very vocal on these issues. And there are many other MPs from all parties who discover their voice. And what people want, we don't want Keir Starmer. And I was criticised, was I not, for my speech here in Bradford when I hosted the Free Palestine event. We don't want preferential treatment from Keir Starmer. We're not asking him to be pro-Palestinian. We're asking him to do justice to the suffering of the Palestinian people. And that bit's missing. And what's been deplorable, absolutely deplorable, last week, I don't know if you saw it in the Mail on Sunday, where a senior source working with Keir Starmer's office saying that the reason all these Muslims are not going to vote for us anymore is because we're doing all this stuff on anti-Semitism. As if all the Muslims are anti-Semitic.
Have they conflated anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism? And they've now labelled people who are anti-Muslim, particularly the Muslim community, if there is anti-Zionism, that they're anti-Semitic as well.
Yeah, so, I generally, I've had this conversation with you in private. I don't tend to use those terms. I really believe that, we experience Islamophobia. We experience, as we've just seen in Canada, in the London, Ontario attack, Muslim family out walking, like any family during this pandemic, mourned out, knocked down and murdered by a terrorist. That's the Islamophobia environment that we live in, the anti-Muslim hatred environment we live in. So why would we subject Jewish, Christian, Hindu, Sikh, or people of no faith, any other community, to that same type of treatment? I don't think it's deplorable. Anti-Semitism is sick, it's evil, and it's wrong. However, if you're asking us not to conflict, I mean, this is the conflict we have sometimes with members of the Jewish community, is they don't want us to judge them based on Israel.
Yep.
Yet they are the defenders of the
this.
Israeli government and its actions. So I will criticize Netanyahu and the Israeli government, but then I'll get attacked by people here in the UK who are prominent Jewish members of the Jewish community here, defending the actions of the Israeli government. A pretty right-wing, xenophobic, racist, I would argue fascist government that has killed so many innocent people. I know I know you're going to say now that's a viewpoint that they would disagree with, but that's my personal view. That's the issue. The key point here, this is coming back to Batley and Spen, is that hopelessness that people feel.
Yep.
They feel as if, Jo Cox, fantastic, beautiful member of parliament. You knew her better than I did. I knew her for a number of years. She was always engaged. She was committed to human rights. She was passionate against Islamophobia. And when she spoke on Kashmir and Palestine, you knew it was personal.
You knew she believed it.
You knew she believed it. And I remember, even before she was an MP, she worked for an aid charity. I remember having those conversations. She was at the forefront of raising the suffering of the Syrian people in that charity and working in that environment. So, that's
why people voted for her in droves.
It was personal.
They felt that there was somebody there who understood what the issues were that the Muslim community felt, and therefore they were happy to go out. And I've said this before: the Muslim vote in Batley and Spen has been crucial in the election process. Whoever the Muslims supported in the Batley and Spen elections in the past has made the difference as to who wins and who loses. And that is reflected throughout the whole of the country. I think wherever there's a large Muslim population, they do have this enormous power to make
and they just don't realise it.
They don't realise it. And this is what I've said previously as well, that the Muslim community has got substantial power at their disposal. The only thing we haven't done is work together as a community to try and make sure that we use that power as effectively as we can. Now, obviously, we're coming to a break now, but this is the one I want to turn to. Now, do you see where it was normally a Conservative Labour fight, and therefore it was clear-cut, and the Muslim community could have made a decision as to which way they wanted to go, who they wanted to support, and could have used their block vote to make a decision and make the parties maybe try and give some guarantees as to what they would do. Has that opportunity been lost by this becoming more or less a three-horse race now, because the Muslim community's votes are going to be divided? As I say, we have very passionate discussions going on in our area. We've seen some really interesting and discussions and debate, but we've also seen the negative side of it as well, which has reflected badly on some of the members of our community, and some of the behaviour has been called into question, not just by ordinary people, but even the imams who are really concerned about how those people who are engaged in this discussion debate are reflecting the Muslim community on the wider scale, and how people from outside are looking in and thinking, is this how Muslims behave? I mean, you saw some of you've been involved in monitoring this as well. So we want to come back to the next section of the next part of the program to talk about, has George Galloway's presence enhanced the discussion debate, or has it diluted the opportunity for the Muslim community to show its power? Now, some people say it has enhanced it. Some people say no, it hasn't. Everyone will say one thing, and that is that we wanted to show a clear message to Keir Starmer that he can no longer, and the Labour Party can count on the Muslim vote. Don't go away. Inshallah, we'll be back soon. Take